Welcome to 6 Million Seeds. I'm Meryl Fury.
And I'm Carrie Bruno. We are healthcare professionals and co-creators of this podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Red Wing Blackbirds.
You know, everybody says, have your kids shop with you and cook with you. And I highly agree with that. And I was really not great at having them cook with me because it was such a mess, right? So it was not a nightly thing. And I wish I would have had them chopping veggies earlier, really participating because they could. And I was just, I was worried about them hurting themselves or burning themselves or whatever. And at the end of it, I really think it was just that I didn't want to clean up more mess and it was going to take longer and all of that. But I think it would have been beneficial to invite them in and have them have a much bigger role.
In today's episode, we talk with Rachael Brown, author of For Fork's Sake. During the conversation, Rachael shares 6 things she would never recommend when transitioning your family to a plant-based way of eating.
Well, welcome everybody. This is 6 Million Seeds. We're back for another year. All right. This episode, we are speaking with Rachael Brown.
It is such a pleasure. We had the chance of meeting you at the Center for Nutrition Studies retreat. So much fun. I knew from the moment I met you and was talking to you about your book and everything you're doing, we had to have you on the podcast. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you both in person. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today.
So can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I grew up in Washington State in a small ranching town, actually. We had a university, which is how my parents got there, but it was mainly ranchers, cattle ranchers. And my dad had grown up on a farm in Iowa, and my mom had grown up in Washington State. So it was a great little town to grow up in. And I grew up mostly spending a lot of time outdoors, eating pretty healthy, I felt like. I went away to school at University of Washington and got my degree in geography. And when I was in my mid-20s, I was told I had high cholesterol. And my dad had always had high cholesterol, and he had been on cholesterol medications since I could always remember. He would be on a medication and he would have something like lose his taste. And so he'd have to change medications. And I just knew I didn't want to deal with that. So I asked doctors what I could do, and they'd said, cut back on eggs and eat less cheese. And I would do that. And my cholesterol numbers would go down a bit, but then they'd creep back up. So that was a frustrating part of life. And but I just, kept eating as healthy as I could and as I thought I was, according to doctors and everything I read. And then fast forward to, I was in my late 20s. My nephew was 5 years old and he was diagnosed with cancer. And his mom was in nursing school at the time. And she had a professor who asked her if she'd looked at the role of nutrition in cancer. And at the time, she had a small hobby farm. She had a huge garden, but basically they made all their own food. They grew pigs and cattle, and they had all their own meat, chickens, all of that. But she taught me how to pull mozzarella, and they were doing the whole kind of hobby farm thing. And she started reading books that this professor suggested, and they went plant-based overnight. And she said, you've got to read this stuff. And I started with the China study, and that just blew my mind. I first of all was so angry that nobody had told me this information, that this was out there, and seemingly everybody I knew was very unaware that diet could have anything to do really with health. So that was kind of our movement into this whole thing. This was 13 years ago almost, so there wasn't a ton of stuff out there about eating plant-based. So I was scouring the internet and found Dr. John McDougall and his website, which everything was listed for free. There was a 10-day program on there, and he suggested getting your blood work, trying to eat plant-based, no oil, and then getting your blood work and seeing the changes. And so my family and I did that, and my cholesterol, I couldn't get back in for the second blood draw until 17 days. But when I got that blood work back and saw my doctor, he said, what did you do? And keep doing it, whatever it was, because your cholesterol dropped 50 points in 17 days. And I couldn't do that with medication. So that felt like my answer to the whole cholesterol question and health question. And we felt amazing after eating this way for 10 days. So at the time, though, it was like good news, bad news, like, hooray, it worked. But oh, shoot, now we have to do this all the time. And I have no idea how to do this all the time. So that was kind of our movement into eating this way and living a different lifestyle. At the time we had 13 chickens. We had cut back on meat. We were eating only organic meat, but we were raising organic chickens. My daughter had a little organic egg business that she sold to neighbors. So it was a lot of big changes for us. My kids were 6 and 8 when we made this transition.
So when you noticed these changes and your cholesterol dropped, did you share with your doctor what you had been doing, and what was his response?
Yes. And he, in his office, he did have some McDougall books, like in the waiting room. And then in his, like when you went into his office, he had a desk with a bunch of food choices behind it, but it would be like low fat turkey slices and, low fat kind of stuff, which really confused me because it just didn't seem like it was entirely on board. But he was very familiar with, he'd done research in cancer work, and he actually went on to become lifestyle medicine certified, board certified. Oh. So at the end of his practice, I asked him, like, why did you have all those food options? And he said, for a lot of people, they won't make the jump right away, straight from eating animal products to no animal products. So this was kind of his way of helping them, like maybe have a low-fat turkey slice sandwich instead of a hamburger,
Right.
Yeah. And for some people, maybe that works. By the end of his practice, he didn't have those foods up anymore. So he just retired a couple of years ago. My son and I also did carotid artery tests because we found out, actually, my grandfather had, he died of pancreatic cancer, but he also had Alzheimer's. And my doctor, when we were first getting into this, my cholesterol would not come very far down. He's like, there could be something else genetically at play here, but we wouldn't worry about that unless you had some of these other markers. Well, my grandfather having Alzheimer's, dying of pancreatic cancer, my uncle died of pancreatic cancer, my dad always having high cholesterol. He said, if you're up for it, it's worth doing. So we did do the genetic testing and found out we have APOE4 for 3 genes. So not the worst for Alzheimer's, but finding out what plaque, what cholesterol, what role that plays. And that was huge. And it turns out my dad has it, I have it, my son has it as well. So carry those genes. So we started with the carotid artery test, and those again, our arteries, I was like in my early 30s and I had the veins of a mid 40-year-old. And the person doing the test said, well, this is like about a C for an American. And I was like, what's a C for an American? I don't want a grade on an American. What do you mean? He's like, well, for the rest of the world, this would be bad, but it's a C for an American. And I was like,
yes,
I don't want that.
Right?
Different grading scale.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, at the end of, I think it was 8 years at the end of that, and that was probably 5 years before the heart scan, my veins were younger than me. They were back down to like late 20-year-old veins, and there I was at late 30s. So it really, my doctor was like, this is what it looks like to reverse heart disease, So like your husband, actually seeing it, it can be a real big wake-up call, but it can be really helpful too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I talk to people these days about, the recalcitrant spouse or partner that just digs their heels in and won't do it.
Yeah.
That's what I always say. Okay, just go get the calcium artery score. Just get that. The coronary artery calcium scan. Get that done.
Yeah. And it speaks for itself.
Yep. There's no argument. You don't have to be the bad guy.
Yep.
Just get that done. And if it's clear, yay. And if it's not
lucky
clear,
you.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
You got work to do. Definitely.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your nephew had cancer, and they changed their family changed their way of eating. What changes did he notice in his health after that change?
Yeah, well, I would say, he did have surgery. He recovered from that. They had to remove lymph nodes. He was 5 years old. That's a big surgery. He is almost 18. He'll be 18 in April, and he is a healthy young man. So, I would say probably energy is the biggest thing. Like my son as well, when we changed this way of eating, I remember him saying he'd come home and they would run a mile in PE class, once every 2 weeks or something. And his kind of energy was different. Sometimes when I talk to parents, I'm like, you all will have more energy. And they're like, well, maybe I don't want my kid to have more energy. They have enough energy, but I'm like, it's not like that sugar high and low energy.
Right.
It's like a sustained, calmer energy, right? But so anyways, my son comes home from school and he's like, I don't know what happened. I was in the front running the mile today, so he would always be trailing in the back, just like, I hate this, I don't like running, all of that, but he had the energy he needed, so that's, I think, the biggest difference in watching kids, just that sustained energy, not those highs and lows, which can also play into behavior, emotional bursts, all those things. When you feel better, you just tend to act better, and be more reasonable, even if you're a toddler, so yeah, it was wonderful to watch. So yes, I sometimes forget to mention he is a thriving almost 18-year-old now. So
Nice.
doing very well.
Yes. Yeah. Really good. Really good.
Yeah.
So one thing you mentioned about them as well, and I'm assuming your family, when it was along the same lines, you pretty much changed overnight. Do you think that had an impact on the results that you saw? And would the energy change have been as noticeable had you gradually done the change?
Right. Yeah, they went very extreme too in the beginning. They actually did Gerson therapy. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's like juicing. So they were just trying to get as many good nutrients into his body so that his body could fight the cancer. We did. I think that kind of like with the heart score or something, if you can transition slowly, and some people have personalities that works better with, not everybody is black or white, wants to start right away, get rid of everything. And I understand that, but it's hard when people don't notice benefits right off the bat, so the real great thing about giving it 10 days or 2 weeks or something, cutting all the offending foods out and giving yourself a chance. Your taste buds change every 2 weeks. So, giving yourself that chance to change your taste literally and experience how you feel, that often is enough for people, kind of like the Gaussian score. They experience that difference in energy, in sleeping better, in feeling better overall. Their skin starts to clear up. I mean, they have all these, their digestive system regulates, they have all these side kind of benefits that they weren't expecting, and they're just feeling so good when they do a kind of a clean switch. It's not to say that you can't get there by, cutting out some offending foods and adding in some others, but it just won't be as dramatic, or you might not associate all the wonderful changes or experience them as quickly. And I think that's so helpful to make lasting changes. I think also, I remind people that for us, this was not like a diet that we were trying. This was a lifestyle change. So it needed to be done in a way that we could carry it on, so there was a lot of trial and error in that. We went really strict in the beginning. And I tell this story in the book, and often that my son came home from a birthday party and he either had 6 hot dogs and 12 cookies, or 12 hot dogs and 6 cookies. I don't remember which, but it was like, we said, we're going to eat this way at home. And if we go out somewhere else, if somebody else serves us something, we'll eat it, gratefully. But I wasn't meaning like, 6 hot dogs and 12 cookies, but he was so excited to have other food, so we quickly realized like, whoa, that's not going to be very sustainable. So, kind of tapering needs for each person, and we were a family of 4, it's different for every member of the family. So learning how to work within that can take a little getting used to, but it's definitely doable. And once he started to experience feeling better, having better energy, all those things, our kids would say they missed certain things, like mac and cheese was such a specialty. If a babysitter came, they'd get the boxed mac and cheese. And then they'd go to friends' house. They were all excited to have it. And they'd come home and say, didn't taste as good as I remembered. I actually like ours better,
Right.
So, just having them experience those tastes change, that's about as good as it gets.
Yeah.
And that's pretty big for a child that age to experience those changes. Some adults don't even realize that the food they're eating doesn't make them feel good. They don't realize the connection.
Yeah.
And that's good for kids to notice, because that is part of their why. You know, if you're trying to get a kid to do this, they need to have their own reasoning, shall we say. If your
Yeah,
parent
it's
tells them they
true.
need to eat healthier, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean as much as realizing that they feel better after eating
Yeah.
this. That'll keep
Yeah.
them on track.
It's so true. And I've really found, honestly, that actually kids are not the hard ones to transition to a plant-based diet. It's much easier for kids. I mean, first of all, they don't have all those emotional ties like we do with certain foods that, you know, maybe we had when we were young that we associate with family, or, you know, grandma's chocolate cake that was made with 2 sticks of butter and, you know, whatever. They don't have those same long-term associations with food. And, you know, they're way more aware. If they watch the video on orangutan, you know, being wiped out from the palm oil farming, say, you know, there's a little cartoon video. It's not graphic or anything like that, but their heartstrings like are tugged, you know, and they will have way more resolve than most adults, and say, no, I'm not doing that because it's not good for the orangutans, you know. So it doesn't take a lot with them, you know. They're gentle souls still, I think, and can really still understand and make choices based on that. That's a little bit harder sometimes for adults.
I think too, you know, after, you know, 40 years of eating something like Kraft macaroni and cheese or whatever that thing is,
Yeah.
right? The chocolate cake with the 2 sticks of butter or whatever the thing is, right? We don't notice that there is a physical impact to it,
right?
We're kind of numb to it. This is, I like I say, most people live from the neck up anyway, right? They're sort of dissociated in their bodies a lot.
Yeah.
And so if I eat this chocolate cake and it lands in my mouth even for 20 seconds, which is probably long, and then 5 minutes later, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour later, I'm feeling awful in my body. Most people don't associate the two.
Yeah. Yes.
It cuts off right here, you know.
Right.
Whereas
it's
a kid
so true.
may very well be able to put the 2 points together, connect those dots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And kind of back to where we started, like with these long-term diseases or diseases that take a long time to build up, you know, vascular diseases, coronary heart disease, you know, you're not feeling all those effects, right? For so long. It would be so much better if we eat, you know, buttery popcorn and broke out in a rash, you know, because, you know, we're having an effect immediately. But you're right. We don't tend to notice a lot of those things, but yeah, kids, I think, are just still more finely attuned. They're still paying attention to those body cues. You know, they haven't learned to turn them off or reason them away or any of the number of things adults do.
What kind of things would you like never do, knowing what you know now, in transitioning your kids or your family?
Yeah, you know, I would start by not being absolutely black and white, because, you know, a lot of times that doesn't work. I mean, I guess maybe first I would say really stop and think about the personalities in your family. You know, like, how does everybody usually do things? Because that's usually how they'll do them going forward. So you have to look, you know, as one kid might be a real fast starter, you know, and be all about, you know, dropping an old thing and taking on the new. Another kid might be a collector of things in their room. They don't want to get rid of anything, you know? So you have those different personalities, and you have to learn how to kind of navigate your way and use those really strengths, you know, figure out how to use those strengths. So yeah, one thing I wouldn't do, you know, looking back with our son, I wouldn't, we took enzymes, which I thought were helpful, you know, like there's BNO or whatever. We had these natural enzymes that I thought were helping us. So we would take them and keep them in my purse if we went out to dinner with friends and got pizza and there wasn't a vegan option or something, like, you know, in the very beginning, we would like, okay, we'll have pizza, you know. And we would all take an enzyme before we ate and think like, well, that's really going to help. Turns out when I was doing my Center for Nutrition, you know, like And actually, when I did the research around them, they're probably at best a placebo. So they aren't doing that much, but we thought that they were helpful. So my son, he was about 10 at the time. He was going to another birthday party, and it was a pizza party in town. And so we're in the car and I'm dropping him off, and I say, do you want to take an enzyme so that, your stomach doesn't hurt if you're going to have pizza? And he said, you know what? No, I don't want to take one, because if I don't take one, I'll just have one piece of pizza and my stomach will start to hurt, and then I won't want to eat anymore. But if I take it, I'll go ahead and eat it, which is wild to me now, thinking it was probably placebo. I wasn't doing anything anyway, but
wow, right?
But he had got to that place of self-regulation.
Yeah,
so I think that's like the key, right? So trying not to do too much for them, really allowing them to figure out for themselves, and in some ways that, it's not that he was physically sick. I don't know how after eating the 6 hot dogs and 12 cookies or whatever, but, allowing them to not feel great after eating too much of something can be as much of a teacher as prohibiting something completely, so, not setting up things to be, I think in doing this so black and white there for a while, it set things up to be the forbidden fruit, right? So that's all he wanted when he'd go somewhere else, or when we allowed it. And it just took on a bigger role than it needed to, really. But that would be something I wouldn't do those extra supplementation kind of things that aren't even helpful in the end. I also wouldn't do, I haven't read a ton on this, but all the supplementation, all the extra supplementation stuff now, learning more and more about that, I really would just stick with the B12. So I think our kids, we're probably getting a lot that their body wasn't able to use, so I would just focus on more wide range colors and a variety of foods. And, everybody says, have your kids shop with you and cook with you. And I highly agree with that. And I was really not great at having them cook with me, because it was such a mess, right? So it was not a nightly thing. And I wish I would have had them chopping veggies earlier, really participating, because they could. And I was just, I was worried about them hurting themselves or burning themselves or whatever. And at the end of it, I really think it was just that I didn't want to clean up more mess, and it was going to take longer and all of that. But I think it would have been beneficial to invite them in and have them have a much bigger role. Jeff Novick, his recipe for longevity soup is in my book, and he created that when his 10-year-old daughter, it was just he and his 10-year-old daughter at home, and he needed to have something that she could cook when she came home from school. So, he says you need a can opener and a scissors, to cut a bag, because he had frozen vegetables and tomatoes and pasta, and it's super simple, but there's such gratification when a child cooks a meal for their family members. You right there have total buy-in on, they're going to eat what they made and they're going to love it. Same going for, if they grow something in the garden, it's even like tenfold, really. They're so proud that they grew that thing and want to share it. So I would invite the kids into more of the process as well. Yeah. The kids did a good job of sharing. I think the other thing I would invite them into is learning how to talk to others about what we were doing. We tried hard, but I would have teachers from my daughter's class, call and say she doesn't have any protein in her lunch, because she didn't have meat or cheese or something,
right.
and I would be forever, dropping off packets, of stapled information or, articles, and I'm sure they didn't get read based on what her feedback was, well, she needs to have some protein or something,
Right.
So ways to share information and how to be around people who are, maybe obstinate or like, I don't know, better comebacks. Because I think elementary school, they were really proud of what they're doing. They understood, they felt better, and they wanted to share that with their friends. Middle school got a lot harder. Everybody wants to fit in middle school, and our kids still ate the way we do. They still took their lunch and all that. They would have some of the, processed crap, all of that stuff. I forget Rip Esselstyn's definition of crap. It's like
calorie rich and processed, I think.
Yes, calorie rich and processed. That's it. Yeah. So the a la carte was like bags of chips and cookies and all of that, but all their friends would line up. And so they sometimes would choose to have that. But, at that time, like kids started to get acne and our kids weren't getting acne for the most part, and all their friends and their friends' parents would ask me like, what do you use? What do you do?
Mhm.
And I would say it's probably the oil, probably the processed foods, cut out maybe the nut
Yeah.
butters if
Yeah,
you
the
really can't.
dairies.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, obviously the animal products first. Yeah. And some people were willing to give it a go and notice differences, and some people weren't. But by the time they got to high school, it was really a cool thing to be eating differently. And by that time, they had friends that were choosing to eat differently than their families, even because they felt better. So yeah, giving the kids as many tools as possible is helpful too.
Yeah. Yeah, that is good. So I want to ask you this too, and I so appreciate all the information that you're talking about with, lessons learned, things that you learned. I don't want to see that they were at the expense of your children, but we often learn at the expense of our kids.
Yeah.
I've learned a few of those lessons. Oh,
Yes. we keep telling them this is our first time doing this, so
That's
I'm
right.
sorry.
We're learning as we go. Sorry.
Yeah, doing the best we can.
You can talk to your therapist when you're 35.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say that when you're a coach and you talk with other parents, I'm assuming, and what would you say that people often get wrong about the idea of whole food plant-based eating and what it means to do that with your children and your family? What do you think is like some wildly wrong idea?
Yeah. There's a few, first that it's really limiting. I think people, often in the beginning, they can't come up with like, what do you eat? If you don't eat dairy or meat, what do you eat? And I'm always baffled, like there are so many foods that aren't meat and dairy, and then it'll be like, oh, but you don't eat fish either? What about eggs? Like there are still a lot of foods outside that group. So I think people think it's going to be limiting, and it most certainly is not. As you well know, people think it's going to be more expensive and that they need to live next to a Whole Foods or something. And that's absolutely not true. And I like to point out that we save money now. People, I have somebody who wrote recently that their grocery bill is cut in half after making this change. They think it's going to take more time. And also in the long run, people go, well, I just don't cook, but even if you are going out to eat, or even if you're pulling frozen stuff out of the freezer to microwave or whatever, you're taking time to eat. It's something we all have to do. We're not going to get around, not eating. So in the long run, I think eating this way, learning how to batch cook, just it may take a little more preparation in the beginning if you haven't been meal planning, but in the end, you will find that you're saving all kinds of time, making last minute trips to the store, you don't have to do that, or running out to get ice cream, or some of those things that maybe you did before. So those are things. Yeah, I think for parents especially, sometimes they think it's going to be such a drag, like it's going to be really hard with their kids. And I remind them that actually with kids, it can be really fun. And, something I talk about is just making mealtime fun. We employed a lot of games because our kids would sit at the table. We had something fun going on, So I have a link in the book for, it was off Monastery. She had a jar of questions. So depending on the age of your kids, for, elementary school age, even into middle school, where it was just jar of questions, and they have a whole bunch of preset questions, but you can make your own, So it's like, well, one dinner, one person got to pull out a question, and sometimes they'd ask, like, can we do another one? Can we do a few more? So sometimes it'd be 4 or 5 questions, but it'd be like, what was your first thought when you woke up this morning? So the person reading it could answer first, you just go around the table. And it's like, as they're learning how to have conversation and how to be thinking, they're hungry. Hopefully that's another big piece that I'll go into. But if you're hungry and you're thinking and you're having conversation, you will eat what's in front of you, there's a really good chance you will. So that's a big one. So we employed a lot of games. I mean, when my son was younger and he really didn't like soup for some reason. So we would play the soup game, close your eyes, here's a bite. Can you tell me what it is? And like 8 times out of 10, he was wrong, but he loved the game, So, things like that, or showing little kids, who don't want to eat a new vegetable. If you watch a video of a guinea pig or a rabbit chewing a carrot, like that, or greens, they just love it and think it's the cutest thing. So you can say to your toddler, let's eat our carrots like a guinea pig, or let's try this cucumber like a guinea pig, and kids just eat that up literally. They love like that you're playing with them, with food. So, the research out of, I think it was University of British Columbia, that you need to try a food 12 times to acquire a taste for it. So as a parent,
up to 20.
Yeah. And as a parent, that can seem so daunting, but I think it's that, like, keep that fun idea in your brain, like it can be different every single time, maybe the first time the kid's just touching it and like, look at your finger, it's pink now, grate it up, like feel it, smell it, more like a science experiment than a mealtime where, you need to try your whatever.
Eat 3 bites before you get up from the table. Yes.
Yes, exactly. I mean, my husband's family had this, so we did employ this. They had a no thank you helping in their household, which meant if you said no thank you, got a very, very small helping and you still had to try it, which I really appreciated. So we have that. We did also have you have to have the number of bites of your age, so if you're 5, you need to have 5 bites, if you're 35, then finish your plate, I guess, but we didn't really have to do it with the adults, but the other piece of that is just making sure kids are hungry when they come to the table. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is that parents are busy, they're getting home from work. If kids were somewhere else, or if they're home, they maybe had a snack, an hour before dinner time. And if that snack was a high fat, processed food, they're probably not that hungry. If they had, string cheese and goldfish or something, they're not going to be that hungry an hour later when you want to sit down and eat nutritious, delicious foods. Yeah, there's lots of fun ways to get kids involved in wanting to eat good, nutritious food.
Yeah.
If what you have is a variety of healthy options, and they can choose from those whenever they're hungry, having a bowl of fruit that is always available, you can eat it whenever you want. Even having the kids help pick, what vegetables do you want to have? Let's wash them, help cut them up, put them in the freezer or the fridge in a drawer where they can get to them, and make one drawer the snack drawer, and have all kinds of healthy options in there. So when you're hungry, help yourself to those things, so then it's not always running to a pantry or a cupboard that has, crackers or goldfish or whatever it is.
And all those things.
Yeah, exactly. And not eliminating treats, I think making plant-based cookies and energy cookies, you can call them cookies. They're really oatmeal with some dried fruit and maybe a couple chocolate chips in them, but you can make really healthy oat cookies that can double as a breakfast cookie, or an afternoon snack or whatever, but those can be full of vitamins, minerals, nutrients, fiber, all those things. Yeah, that would be a wonderful antidote to, only eating French fries or something else, you call it something fun, you make a fun name for that cookie, and there you go,
I remember my pediatrician telling me when my older one, who's now 36, when we were going through, weaning, right? So you go from breastfeeding with solids, and he was telling me, they will not, generally speaking, unless there's really something going on, they will not starve themselves.
Right.
So you provide healthy food. Start with, of course, they recommend you start with rice cereal, which I would make it at home, right? Just brown rice, grind it up. And then after that, start with your more bitter vegetables, right? The more potent ones, the strong ones. And don't give up. Do not buckle. Do not start adding sugar. Do not start mixing it with sweet potatoes. Nothing. Just give the kid that, and they will not intentionally starve themselves unless there's something really, really, serious going on. In that case, then back to the doctor and get it worked out. But I think so often parents get scared, this child is not going to eat, or this child is, is losing weight, or when I was, my other child ate massive amounts. And this one is, this little skinny
Right.
kid doesn't need,
Mhm.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
they wind up succumbing to those fears so often.
Fruit is not a bad thing. If kids want to eat raspberries, great. I will spend some extra money on raspberries if you're going to eat raspberries, I will do that, so kind of reframing it for yourself too. Yeah, the taste thing also, my adopted nieces and nephews from Ethiopia, when they came, they didn't like anything sweet because they grew up eating very spicy foods. So they had bearberry, and I mean, they would sprinkle it on their morning oatmeal with some salsa. That's
Wow.
that's how they ate oatmeal. To us, we're like, I can't even take a bite of it. It's so spicy. But, it took about a year, and then their taste kind of acclimated to more, American spice levels. But, that was what they'd been raised on. Most cultures don't have kid food and then adult food, right? It's
Right.
you learn to eat what adults are doing. And that's another big thing. I encourage parents to not be short order cooks for their kids, just you cook the meal that you're eating. And like you said, if they're hungry, they will eat it. If they're not, that doesn't mean you get a snack at 8 p.m. before bed. I mean, that's what we
that
did.
also
We're
doesn't mean we revert to sugary cereal. Right?
Exactly. It means
Yeah.
if you're hungry, there's your leftover plate. You can have that, but that's your option. That's what we did. And kids are not dumb. They learn really quickly, that they're going to have to eat it eventually. And so they eat it.
So what led you to write your book, The For Fork's Sake?
Yeah, so we'd had this amazing experience as our family, and different members of our, families of origin and friends around us were making changes and having, amazing benefits as well. But I mentioned I have a degree in geography. I taught yoga and Pilates when the kids were young. I taught a nutrition, self-esteem, and exercise class at our local university. And then I went back to school for massage, and for 10 years had been doing a technique called pain neutralization. And it helps people get out of chronic pain using neurological work. So that was super gratifying. And then COVID hit, and my kids were home at school, doing school on their computers at home. And I was trying not to drive everybody crazy because I couldn't see my clients. And that's when I went back to school at the Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies in Cornell course. And so I got my plant-based nutrition certification, and it was great to find out some of the science behind what we were doing. And I'd read a lot of books, but I knew a lot of the friends that I knew, family I knew, weren't going to read the China study. I would give it to them, but they wouldn't read it. Maybe they would watch Forks Over Knives, but there wasn't a lot really in between the cookbooks and really scientific books. So COVID was still happening. I couldn't see anybody, I went back and did the food and sustainability course certificate program through CNS. And I think my family was really tired of hearing about the evils of factory farming and food injustice and everything, because this is all I was talking about at dinner, And so in trying to figure out how to reach as many people as I could with this information, I decided to write a book. And I wanted it to be easy enough, quick enough, so that people could get a really quick why. Like, why is this important for me? Why is this important for the planet? And then a really quick how to. Like, if I want to start this tomorrow, how do I do it? So that was my goal, was to, I'm hoping it's like the entryway book for people. And I hope they do read the China study and Whole. And there are many wonderful, the Starch Solution, there are so many great books out there to read. But a lot of young parents I talked to said, I don't even read books anymore. I either listen to an audiobook, which I have one, or I read blogs because I just don't have the time. So I was trying to, fill that hole for people who don't feel like they have a lot of time. So so it's a short book, and it's actionable steps at the end of each day. And at the end of 10 days, you have everything you need to give it a go. So that was my hope in writing the book.
And that's it on the shelf behind you, right?
Yeah.
That's it. Yep, there it is. For fork's sake.
I really enjoyed the book. Like you said, it was very easy to read. It took me a little longer because I didn't read it all in one sitting, but it's short enough and easy enough to read that you could, but it does walk you through the perfect steps. So like, why would you want to do this? And how do you even get started?
Mhm.
I think it's very approachable for a lot of people to use as their first book if they don't know where to start.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's exactly what I was going for. And honestly, one of the first podcasts I did, the woman said, I read your book on the plane. I had a 4-hour flight and I read it on the plane. And I was like, perfect. That's what it's meant to be, is like a 4-hour. Like, that's what I wanted it to be. So I was so glad to hear that worked. Yeah.
So one last thing before we sign off, we would like to know if you have any home remedies that you use with your kiddos or for yourself.
Yeah. Well, they're slightly different. For the kids, I think the easiest way, when they weren't feeling great or something, they liked smoothies. And, in the beginning, when they didn't really love greens when they were little, smoothies were a great way to get in greens. You put berries in there. I made the mistake once of putting raw chard in, and it was like fluorescent green, and we took a sip and they were like, oh, I was like, that's the one smoothie you don't have to drink, because I couldn't drink it either. It was so bitter. But for the most part, you throw berries, blueberries, a mix of frozen berries, cranberries, some frozen bananas, you can add a handful of oats in there, nut butters if you want, and this many greens of whatever greens you have, and that just packs a lot of vitamins and nutrients that kids need. And usually if they weren't feeling well, a smoothie with a straw feels good on the throat. That, or we do some honey, so chamomile tea with honey, or just veggie broth with noodles if they weren't feeling great, if their stomach was upset or something. My husband and I do the I don't even know who came up with this, but it's the like cayenne pepper, ginger, garlic, pineapple juice concoction. That is kind of hard to stomach, but it burns going down, but you feel like you're burning whatever is in you that you need to get out when you drink this. And my kids will they're older now, and they will try us and be like, no, thank you to that. So I don't strain it either, so it's kind of thick. But I feel like that helps us out when we need it.
Maybe a good burn.
It is a good burn. Yes, exactly.
See, I used to give one of those to my older ones. I'd put green powder, some cayenne pepper, some honey in a spoon.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like the plug your nose.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was of the mind that you should never be sick around me. Don't bother. It's not going to be fun. I'm not going to hover over you and mop your brow and all.
Right.
Nope,
Right.
this green stuff.
Toughen up. Yeah, I think my kids would probably say the other thing I would say is, have you had some water? Because also for kids, oftentimes when they think they're hungry, it's like, or my head hurts, I would start to say, where does your head hurt? Is it here? Have a glass of water. They'd get busy playing or have come home from sports or whatever, and they think they're starving, but really they were thirsty, so that might be one of the things my kids would say. I would say all the time is, do you need some water? Have you had some water? How much water have you had today? Right. So yeah, water is also another answer.
It is. Water and a good nap, I think.
Solves almost everything. True. World peace, maybe.
That's right. No kidding. Everybody.
I used to say massage. I used to say massage if everybody got massage, but if everybody ate plant-based, got massage, drank enough water, and took naps, I think we'd be all right.
Yeah. Wow.
Great advice.
I think so. Totally solve the world's problems on this podcast.
Exactly. One child at a time.
That's right. That's right. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time and your energy and your enthusiasm and your great laughter. This has been a wonderful, wonderful exchange and interview. Thank you so much.
And thank you for all you do and writing your book. I know it is probably already reached so many people, and I'm sure it will continue to reach so many more.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you for all the work you're doing for helping children and families. And I really do believe it's changing the world, because as you're changing how people are feeling and the energy they're bringing out into the world, there's nothing greater to do. So thank you for all your work.
Thanks again, Rachel.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Right,
All right, take care.
right. 6 Million Seeds is made possible by the generosity of Bruno Chiropractic, Acme Construction Metals, EXP Realty, and Deck It Out Builders. We thank you for your support.